Hello and welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates. Welcome to part two of the video from last time. As we get started today, there's some things on my mind. You see, like the world is a crazy place. And in the last video, I talked about some things, I don't know, about what's going on with the world. And I would say in general, like, yeah, I'm thinking about there's two main issues that I think are important to understand. One of the main issues is this idea of like if you are in charge of a country, then the question is, do you know what is the best way to manage a country? All right, so let's get a like a whiteboard up. It's googly duck. And so this is what I'm saying. So the first issue is like do does the political class know how best to manage the country, right? Now, okay, let's just say that there's three answers. So one answer is yes, they know from the perspective of the economics. Like I'm mainly talking about economics. Then there's no, they don't really know. Echo nu mikis. And then what is this? Maybe so. I don't know what to put in this column yet, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. Okay, so now if the answer is yes, they do know, then the question is like, are they applying those principles right? And then from here we have another yes or no tree. And then the question is, okay, then if no, why? So the issue that I have here is that like, is it possible that the regime, let's call it the regime, because if it's a no, then that means that it's a regime, right? Because why? Because they want to remain in office. They want to concentrate political power. They want to gain benefit for a small class of people. Now, as soon as we say this word, gain benefit for a small class of people, then the issue is, well, wait a minute. So are you saying that if a political regime is aiming to gain interest, if they're working for the interests of a small group of people, then is that is that automatically like not the best economic policy? And that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. So that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. So one of the things is, one of the reasons why I'm doing all this studying and I'm doing all this thinking is because I'm trying to understand what is the foundation of economics. Like, is it that you need to go to some kind of macroeconomic course and then suddenly you're going to know what it means to run a country? Like, why isn't it that all the citizens in the country, they don't know what is the best way to manage a country? Why is it that I speak 4 languages and I've traveled to over 30 countries? I've lived in China for 10 years, Eastern Europe for 10 years. Why is it that I've seen all these different systems and I don't know what the answer is? So if I don't know the answer, then it means that like 99% of our country, the great country of Canada, it means that nobody knows. Or is it that everybody's smarter than me, right? Then the second question is like, can you correctly predict future events? Do you have some basis for predicting future events? Like every investment, when you go to the bank and you want to take out a loan, the reason you're taking out that loan is because you believe that there are economic conditions which are beneficial for your idea, for your business, and you believe that you can earn money from that that business, and then you can go on and pay back the loan, and you can also pay the interest. Like, it's very simple. Like, let's say I borrow $10,000, and I have to pay 15% interest. So then, like, it means that I believe I can earn uh, $10,000 plus, and I can earn more. I can earn 20% to pay back that loan. And I think that's also true when it comes to geopolitical events. Why is it that some people are able to correctly predict future events and other people are not able to correctly predict future events? The whole concept of making bets in the stock market, like, if we go into the geopolitical situation with the US policy toward Russia or toward Iran or toward China, they're all making bets. They're looking at the future, and then they're trying to make some kind of geopolitical positioning in order to grow in power and grow in might. And so I think it's interesting to see who is saying what on YouTube, and then to try to understand who's correct most of the time. I don't know. That's what I think about all day long. All day long. All right, so we are, as I said, that these chapters are kind of off. Next week, actually this week, later in the week, we're going to be looking at chapter 1 of the China Mirage. But before we get there, I need to complete the second part of the video from last week. All right, so let's do some reading. Let's see. We can. Nice. All right, the iron plow. What is going on here? What is sequential engine? The progression was sequential. Iron plus enabled the clock. Iron surplus enabled the clock, which enabled the press, which enabled gunpowder and the caravel. Each stage unlocked the next. All right, so we need to find the development of iron first. How 5 centuries of development produce one inevitable explosion of powder. The accumulation, the printing press, the eyeglasses, the mechanical clock, the water wheel. Okay, I think that we're there. Okay, so I would assume that the first thing that happened was we reached the Iron Age, and once we were in the Iron Age, then the Europeans were able to take advantage of the, what do they call it? I can't remember the name. I always forget this word because it's such a weird word. The Gulf Stream. Well, because they call it the Gulf Stream, but like the Persian Gulf, that's kind of like the only time we hear the word Gulf. And so I always assume that the word Gulf Stream has some connection to the idea of the Persian Gulf. Anyways, the Gulf Stream is actually the weather system which takes all of that water, that warm current, that the water warms up along the equator between the American continent and the European continent in the Atlantic Ocean. And it then takes that warm water and it brings it in through the European continent. So the Europeans are able to enjoy like temperate climate and consistent rain. And then the early issue was that these people, they had these gigantic trees and they had all this vegetation and animal life. It was just an explosion of life. So the conditions of the air with the rain and the temperate climate enabled the sun to nourish the vegetation. And then once you have a nourishment of the vegetation, then of course that is what the animals are going to eat. And then when the animals eat it and the vegetation is growing, then all of that eventually dies, and it creates a cycle where their poop is going to be fertilizing the ground, and their dead bodies are fertilizing the ground and the vegetation every year upon year, goes into the soil and it's capturing all of that energy from the sun. And so it makes the trees bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Like if you look at the trees in California, and what's the state above California? Those also enjoyed some warm current that coming off of the comment on dit, the Pacific Ocean. And it was, the problem was the Iron Age. And I talked to some people who are like, no. Before this, what they did was they would burn the trees. They would use fire. But then I did a little research, and it said that if you burn the trees, then like the ground is like good for, you know, like only like 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, or something like that. And for some reason, it's like it's different. I still don't know the answer to that problem. Anyways, so once you can see the iron plow is there. We're in the Iron Age. The iron becomes so strong that the humans are able to use. Remember, we talked about tris. Tris is how, okay, the working element. So the working element, there's 4 elements to like a system. The working element is that metal that's right. It goes inside of the ground. And then we have the transmission. So the transmission is you can see the wheels and the equipment that's attached to the animal. And then next we have the engine, which you know, humans in Africa, they had to like use their arms, their body, in order to do farming. And well, I guess any farmer before they were able to invent these types of systems. And then you have the control element, which is like these handlebars right here, so that you can guide the system. This is a complete system. Now, as you can see, this is a small version of a system, and people, they started realizing, oh look, we got the wheel and we got a system, and then the animals, it's the engine. So you can see how that then leads to the water wheel. The water wheel, we're replacing the animal with water. And the water is what is the engine. So this wheel is the transmission. It's taking the energy from the water and putting it into this transmission system. Now, in this particular image, we don't really see where is the control element. But I mean, because I guess this is what, grinding wheat or something? Milling. All right, and then look, so then so what happens is the output, what followed was not ambition, it was systematic output. All right, so now we have a clock, because as you can see, they're getting better and better at producing these little engines, and then I don't know, the question is, what is powering the clock? Obviously, it's like some kind of coil. So they create a coil which turns into, so they wind up the clock. And then by winding up the clock, they understand that they can hold a certain amount of energy. All right. And then, okay, so the pipeline had been running for 500 years. 1492 was its product. Extended proactive working life with artisans and scholars. So they created eyeglasses, which unlocked so much potential from humans. And then once they have eyeglasses, then they're like, hey, like, I would like to like get more information. I'd like to read. I'd like to learn. And then at the end, we got this gunpowder, the accumulation. By 1400, Europe possessed a critical mass of technological, economic, and political machinery that made stopping outward expansion impossible. All right, so they got everything they want, and they're the most powerful culture in the world. And then they decide, hey, let's go look around the block. The fragmentation advantage, why no one could say stop. All right, the very chaos seemed weak, made it impossible to stop. So on the right, we have the Chinese silk ceiling. The emperor could ban shipbuilding, the exploration by decree, stopping progress overnight. And but then the Europeans, they had dispersed type of power, and which created what? If Portugal refused an explorer, Spain might say yes. If the church condemned the idea, a rival prince protected it. Every idea had somewhere to go. Every initiative had someone to fund it. Okay, so we have two benefits of this time period. We had like a huge amount of wealth. You might call it, what is it called? Discretionary income. So in their banks, they just had tons and tons and tons. They were able to pull all of this value and put it into tokens, whether it be gold or whether it be contracts or whether it be relationships. And then they could then use that potential energy and then direct it into different endeavors. Europe arrived with the entire ladder. Contact between civilizations at different development stages produced mathematically predictable outcome. The higher rung dictates the terms. All right. So at the bottom, Europe didn't bring superiority. It brought compound interest of 5 centuries of development. Europe could use every rung on the ladder, from iron tools to joint stock financing, as a weapon. The difference is not intelligence or courage. It's the accumulated development of time. Exactly. All right, so if we go at the bottom, we can see that we have the indigenous North Americans, and basically they have like hunting. They're just hunting and trading. And then we move up to the Caribbean peoples. They have surplus and storage. And then once you have storage, that's when you start to go into like creating contracts and money. So tokenizing that value, and then you move into finance, where you're able to borrow from the future. And then once you're able to amass a huge amount of wealth, then you have a monopoly. You can control the system. Explosive power of the printing press. Containment. China invented printing 500 years before Europe, but the state controlled publication to preserve canonical orthodoxy. Contagion. Gutenberg's Bible was printed in 1492. The technology was continent-wide within 50 years. Columbus's return to Spain was printed and circulated across European capitals within weeks. The press turned every discovery into a public invention that no authority could rescind. There you go. So this is the thing about democracy, is that central power is the enemy. Centralized power is the enemy. Dispersed power is the best way to do it, because when you have a dispersion of power, then it welcomes new ideas, and the better ideas are able to win, to beat out the weaker ideas. Where when you have some kind of group, like some group of people who control everything, then they are able to squash other people's good ideas, and then those good ideas aren't able to develop. Gunpowder and the calculus of distance. I think we talked about this one. Anyways, the spectacle. China valued the noise, psychological spectacle of gunpowder. Number 2, the engineering. Europe asked one question: how far can we kill from? They corned powder into kernels and used Bell-founded expertise to maximize range. Hey, this is an interesting point, right? Because why did they have bells? They had bells because they were able to develop the mechanized clock. And once they had the mechanized clock, then the church, they created these bells. They wanted people to come to church. And then once they had this ability to create bells, and somebody said, hey, well, if you can create a bell, then I can create like a tube, and then I can add some gunpowder, and we can turn this into a science. Da Gama orders: if a hostile vessel approaches, stand up and blow it out of the water. The result, the lethal standoff range. A cannon on a ship is not just a weapon, it's a foreign policy that enforces terms of trade from a distance at no personal risk. Right. So you have this piece of, you have this water here. Now, if we go back into the conflict between Western powers and Eastern powers. So if we talk about the US-China war, in fact, I think all of this is the US-China war. And it's kind of a complicated situation because the US and China are actually allies to some extent. But then, I was watching this one YouTube video, and this lady was like, she's like, do you know why Xi Jinping didn't meet Donald Trump at the airport? Because some people are like, hey, like, why is that? And it's because of the U.S. policy toward Taiwan. Technically, U.S. and China are enemies because the U.S. is selling weapons in order to keep Taiwan independent. And China has a policy that they want to unify their power and their land. So by something like 2040 something, 2048, 2049, they have like 100% unification. There's like when they get like the unification of the mainland China and Taiwan has to happen according to Chinese policy before 2049. So then the question is, well, why isn't it happening right now? Well, that's because the United States is supplying weapons to Taiwan. And then, okay, well, what's the issue? Well, the issue is that imagine that you have an ally and they're supplying weapons to your enemy. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So the Chinese and the Americans are actually technically enemies. They're frenemies. They're friends and enemies. So I think that the first war between the U.S. and Russia in the Donbass was an attempt by the United States to see if there's two benefits. One benefit is that they're able to from the economic perspective, they can study the Russian system and watch how they adapt to the economic constraints of the tariffs and also a wartime economy, and to watch how they adapt. And then number two is that they were able to they were able to feed a lot of data into their AI systems in order to produce robotics, new robots. So I predicted at the very beginning of the conflict 4 years ago that the main, like what Europe needs to do is they need to produce batteries and they need to produce robots, that this was going to be a war of robots. And everyone's like, what are you talking about, war of robots? And in fact, I didn't even really understand what I was saying. And it turned out that it was like a war of drones. So that like the robots are in the air, they're just flying robots, right? Now this is like, they have like this 50 meter kill zone where, like, as you can see in the war right now, there's not a lot of movement. And it's because of the technology on both sides is so powerful that humans, they can no longer go into those areas. So it's just robot on robot wars. And these robots are called drones. So this is like when you have two borders this is on land war. The war between the United States and Iran is this kind of war right here, because the United States, they're talking about the Golden Dome. And the Golden Dome is an attempt to develop their anti-ballistic missile system. Of course, the concept of dome, it doesn't make any sense, actually. The idea here is that they're going to use a missile to shoot another missile out of the sky, which is absolute lunacy. And you need a really, really high level artificial intelligence and supercomputing power to be able to understand what is the trajectory of a supersonic missile that's coming into your dome. And the Iron Dome has proven to be ineffective. So, which means that we're now in the stage where we need to create an actual Golden Dome. We have to improve our anti-ballistic missile systems. And all of this is because, like, if you think about a war against China, step number one is from a distance. So it's going to be ballistic missiles. And then step number two is once they get a foothold, once they're able to land, then that's when you start face-to-face warfare. All right. So the first thing you have to do is you start with your anti-ballistic missiles in order to protect your ships, because this war has to be fought from the water. And then once their anti-ballistic missiles are intact, then eventually they're able to destroy all of the Chinese systems along the coast. And then once they get a foothold, then we go back into the drones. So all of this technology is being developed by the United States in order so that they can remain powerful against the Chinese, because the American policy is to make sure we keep our foreign wars on foreign territory. The problem is now, as you can see with the war in Iran, the Trump government, they get political support from the citizens. They didn't spend their time and effort trying to get political support. So, like, for example, if we go into my X account, I say some pretty crazy things, and too seriously. But like my most recent post, I said, okay, they didn't make the case for war. So if you watch this Chris Hedges video, he talks about how they didn't make the case for war. It means that he didn't get. Okay, look here. So I say the word of the day is sustainable totalitarianism. The good and honorable people, the great Western powers founded by the principles of human rights, division of power, and Christian tradition, get so fat and lazy off their free money that they can't defeat totalitarian regimes. Right? So that's the issue, is that the United States, they didn't make the case for war. They weren't able to get the support from the people. Like if we think about 9/11 and the war in Iraq, all of the people were, not all, but like a huge amount of people were excited with the concept of war, because they said, hey, we're going to fight back. We're going to go get those guys. They look what they did to New York. Look what they did to our Twin Towers. We're going to give payback. And in fact, it's hard to say that like some people, they believe that there's not a lot of connection between Iraq and the Twin Towers, but at least they were able to make the case for war. With the current battle against Iran, they were not able to make the case for war. And you can see like the Marco Rubio constantly backtracking, and he's like, we can't allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. I mean, I believe they already have a nuclear weapon, but they're just not stating it out loud. And then Donald Trump, he actually says in the news, he says, I don't think about Americans' financial situation. Right. So I believe that right now the only way to win this war is to get the American people behind the effort with their blood, sweat, and tears. That means a false flag. They need a false flag. They have to have a false flag. They have to make it look like Iran blew something up in America. That's the only way. Because the issue is that because you can't control the whole battle with just ships. At some point, you need boots on the ground. And right now, Americans are not willing to put boots on the ground because they don't understand the logic behind this. All they see is Benjamin Netanyahu, like the power is slipping through his fingers, and Donald Trump, power is slipping through his fingers. You have these two guys who they thought that they could hold on to their political power, and now their political power is just dripping. They can't hold on to it any longer. Crusades and an institutional template. The Crusaders carried crosses. The accounting was always in ducats. So this is trying to make the argument that the Crusades established the lasting habit of state-blessed, privately financed expansion towards profitable targets. This specific fusion produced the template for the trading companies and colonies. Cost, returns, profit. The Holy Cover. The medieval Europe accumulated a dangerous surplus of trained warriors bound by feudal loyalty with no productive outlet. A holy cause was required to mobilize them. Exactly. You see, so the Crusades, it's like they have all this stuff. They have all these warriors. They have all this stuff. Like you hear these arguments about the end of the Cold War, and so the fall of the Soviet Union. And there's a group of people that are like, hey, the war's over. Let's bring all of our productive capacity back to America. Let's get people working. And then there's another group of people that's like, no, we have to have NATO, and we have to have a war. Like we have to constantly funnel money into the war effort, so we're always prepared, which means we always need to be on conquest, and we always need to be pushing back. 8th century warfare produced an unemployed class. What's this? Conquista. 8 centuries of frontier warfare against Moorish rulers normalized violence and land seizure as standard economic advancement. Now, this is what's going on with Israel right now. And this is like the deal between the United States and Iran saying, hey, look, you guys have to stop. You have to ask Israel to stop murdering and stealing the land from the Lebanese, because it's becoming normalized. Gaza, well, what happened in Gaza? They murdered people and they took their land, and now they're going to Lebanon. They're going to murder people and take their land. The concept of the greater Israel, from what is it called? Something to the river Euphrates, the river to the sea. Well, so the Israelis, they're trying to normalize this idea of murdering and taking people's land. And they're saying that God promised them. I mean, okay, well, if God promised, like right now, I'm reading the Bible and I'm in like the Jericho, the story of the city of Jericho. So in the story of the city of Jericho, like for 7 days, they just march around the city, and then on the seventh day, they all use trumpets and they say bo 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 bo, and then the city walls fall down. All right. So what does that mean? It means that God fought our war. This war was fought by God himself. Okay. So if you believe that God promised you these lands, then why are you constantly murdering people? Why don't you march around without saying a word and then just use your trumpets and let's see if God will actually give you this land? The output, Calabero. When Granada fell, the entire class of professional warriors became unemployed overnight. The market collision. Columbus arrived at the exact moment of maximum supply, offering new world to conquer. Huh. The conquistadors were not monsters produced by the new world. They were a product of the old world exported at the moment of greatest supply. Land's law of social. Okay, so the author of the book is his name is Lance. He has a law of social responsibility, market power disparity, private access to power, unequal groups, private initiative. The physics of dominion, where one group is strong enough to push another around and stands to gain by it, it will do so. Even if the state abstains, companies and individuals will not wait for permission. This is not exclusively European. Mongols, Aztecs, Iroquois, all follow the same structural logic. The question is never, will the strong take the weak? The question is only, what will they tell themselves while doing it? Okay, so, I mean, this is a different way of forming the argument. So it's like, it's saying the reason why Putin is attacking Ukraine is because Ukraine is weak. And the reason why the United States and Israel is attacking Iran is because Iran is weak. And the reason why China is, well, who's China attacking actually? All right. So the thing is, like, we should never believe that at any moment that Russia, Israel, or the United States are going to suddenly stop killing and stealing people's stuff. Like they will always do it because why? Because where one group is strong enough to push another around and stands to gain from it, it will do so. Engineering a solution to geography, mixed rigging, combining square sails for speed and lantine sails for tacking against wind. Stern rudder, replacing steering oars for precise maneuverable in Atlantic swells. The ship was a statement built to awe. The other was a tool built to learn. Deeper providing necessary open ocean stability, unlike broad Mediterranean cogs built for calm inland waters. The initiative process. The caravel was not invented by isolated genius. It evolved by accumulated experience. Every voyage revealed a problem, and every problem produced a physical modification, a process of Portuguese called doing by knowing. Geography dictates routes. The escapable physics. The age of discovery did not follow human ambition, it followed the path of least resistance on the water. The equatorial trade drove Columbus from the Canaries to the Caribbean in a single month. What is that? This one? The Portuguese learned it was faster to sail hundreds of miles out of the way toward Brazil to catch favorable winds than to hug the African coast. Better to sail long and fast than to tack and fight a shorter distance. Yeah, I remember this. Like, I was in a, I was in a yachting competition. So we had it was like a race, and then there's about I don't know about 60 yachts, and our captain. There was this one time where there's a group of people. They were like going back and forth in order to traverse this one section of water, and our captain he decided to go around it, and man, we were just like so fast. Like, in fact, there were all these complaints from the other ships. They thought that we turned on our engine, and we're just flying around the other way. But it was all the wind. We found some way to like go the long way, but the long way had the advantage of the wind. Doing by knowing. The proto-scientific method. The Portuguese applied the scientific method to geography a century before it was called science. While Spain conquered territory by planting crosses, Portugal conquered it by entering latitudes on maps. In 1537, Portugal boasted, "Our sailors departed very well informed, provided with instruments and rules of astronomy." The experiment: send probe ships slightly further down the coast. Where's 2? The data: record precise latitude, wind patterns, and ocean currents. The synthesis: compile data at Sagres combining Arab and Jewish astronomical tables. The extension: update the maps, the master maps, and extend range for the next voyage. The embryonic joint stock structure. The individual explorers needed ships. Ships needed massive capital. Capital required an asymmetric return. Risk was shared, profit was divided, and private initiative was officially blessed. Every great trading empire of the next 3 centuries, including the Dutch, the British, was built on this exact template. All right, so at the top we got, so this is the architecture of shared risk. The crown provided a charter, legal monopoly rights, and the state blessing. Takes 1/3 cut from the return. The merchant bankers providing massive capital, outfit the ships, and furnish supplies in exchange for asymmetric dividends. And the aristocratic leaders provided military expertise, war bands, and leadership take a share of the spoils. So you can see this, the whole model of the European countries was not only the distribution of power through different countries, but also even within the countries, we have these different classes of people that are all working together in order to benefit from the world. The world's first addictive global commodity. Phase 1 is medicine. Originally brought from India by Arabs, sugar served as a pharmaceutical luxury locked in apothecary boxes. So we're talking about sugar. As cultivation spread, the price fell, moving sugar from a rare medical treatment to an obsession for aristocracy, and finally a necessity. Prices plummeted further, cementing it as a mass market necessity. This arc would soon repeat with tobacco, coffee, and tea. The fashion of sugar in Europe created a demographic catastrophe in the Atlantic. All right. Laboratory for the New World Order, the value extraction system. So they had a system where they would seize land, they would have forced labor, they would trading capital, the blank slate. The business model was perfected on islands off the coast of Africa. Every economic, social, and institutional arrangement developed here was later transferred. By 1492, Europe possessed the capital, the transport, the labor model, and the market. The only thing missing was a large source of land. Astronomical European sale price. Gold as an ultimate IOU. Scarce, durable, divisible, portable, universally trusted. Monetary strategy versus greed. Gold was the IOU that required no counterparty, no bank, no king's seal to be accepted. A gold florin in Florence was mathematically identical to the gold florin of Cairo. Finding a direct source was pure monetary strategy aimed at bypassing the Islamic middlemen of the Sahara and keeping the profit margin. Gold was the destination. The African coast was the route. The caravel was the tool. Mathematical engine. All right, the arbitrage gap. Mathematical engine of African exploration. All right, so we got the middleman penalty. The mine, Mali, Timbuktu, camel route, Tunis, ship, Valencia. At every stage, a markup. Silver traded for gold at 10 units to 1 in Tunis. The exact same gold bought 13 units of silver in Valencia. 3-unit arbitrage gap was the gravitational pull driving ships southward. This is not exploration. It's a supply chain optimization with cannons. All right, so they just went direct to the gold because in the merchant system, we got 13 to 1, we got 10 to 1. So you're going to go where you can get the gold and without paying other people. When monetary gift of economics collided, the gift economy versus the monetary economy. Columbus wrote, they give away everything they have. They do not covet other people's property. An economy operating on reciprocity of trust, entirely unfamiliar with the concept of hoarding property. Compared to, look at, they got open hands and these guys got knives. A highly optimized system backed by overwhelming military power, driven by the absolute mechanical necessity of ROI. The meeting of a gift economy and a monetary economy produced a mathematically predictable outcome. The New World was not a different story. It was the same story at a larger scale, with more violence and less time. The Great Divergence begins. The retreat. By 1500, civilization that possessed the larger ships, the most men, and the most resources made a deliberate decision. China dismantled its fleet, burned its naval records, retreated entirely behind its walls. Building a ship of more than 2 masts became a crime punishable by death. Same tools, radically different outcomes. The institution is the variable. China's institution had a name, the Totalitarian State. And that's it. Well, the issue now is that I said the word of the day is sustainable totalitarianism. So the problem with totalitarianism is that the Russian and the Iranian and the Chinese system have now adapted, and the American system became fat and lazy, and so they can't, like, it's now they don't have the ability to push around these totalitarian states anymore. So welcome to the world of totalitarian government. Anyways, thank you for joining me, and we'll catch you later on this week with another video to talk about history and geopolitical things. And step by step, we'll learn something. Bye-bye.